Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We will begin. Nelda, would you call the roll, please?
Commissioner Shoemaker,
Present.
Commissioner David,
Present.
Commissioner Gossett Simon,
Present.
Vice Mayor Moore,
Present.
Mayor Hillman,
Present.
Town Attorney Rubin, Town Manager Labadie.
Present.
Thank you.
And will we rise, please, for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Does anyone have any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Yes.
Marshall?
Yes, two items. One being in front of you on your desk is a resolution that I'd like the commission to consider that would authorize me to sign documents related to the American Rescue Plan Act. If we could add that to the end of new business would be one. The second item I sent you this morning, Vice Mayor Moore has done a robust amount of research as it relates to fund balance, our current practices, and potentially some suggestions moving forward. I apologize that we didn't get it on the agenda, but it might be a bit heavy of a topic for a straight report. So at least we should consider adding it as a new business item because I can't imagine that presentation won't be followed by some good discussion amongst the commission. So at least adding that to a agenda item would be helpful.
Okay, so that would be new business C. And B was, what was that again, please?
The C was the last one I just said.
Yeah.
The D would be the resolution 2021-025.
Right.
Thank you.
And the importance of that is that we were expecting $1.7 million and we got an extra 300,000 plus or minus.
Correct, sir. And well, basically I had to sign the funding agreement. Those commissioners that were with us in Orlando, yes, that came through on Friday. I went ahead and they've identified me as the authorized signator for all the federal funding documents. I just want you to be comfortable that I will be signing those on behalf of the commission.
Okay, anything else from anybody? Okay, can we have a motion then to accept the agenda with those two additions?
I move we accept the agenda as presented with the two additions.
There a second? All in favor, just say aye.
Aye.
Okay, presentations and proclamations.
None.
Okay, moving on. Public comments, do we have any?
There are no public comments today.
Okay, we will close public comments then. Announcements, board vacancies. There's a Board of Adjustments and Appeals. There are 2 vacancies for 3-year terms. Code Enforcement has 1 vacancy for a 3-year term. Natural Resources has 1 vacancy for a 3-year term. Planning Board has 1 vacancy for an unexpired term. Upcoming meetings, August the 19th at 2 o'clock is the Financial Advisory Board meeting. August 24th is a Town Commission special meeting. That's a budget review, I believe. And August 31st is Code Enforcement. We don't have, or we do have a board action report to discuss.
There are none.
There's none.
Okay. Ordinances. Let's move on. This is on page 7. This is proposed ordinance amending the qualifying period, an ordinance of the Town Commission of the Town of Highland Beach, Florida, amending the Town Charter Section 1.06, Town Commission created election terms, Town Clerk, qualifications of elections, general election law, at the request of the Palm Beach County Supervisor of Elections, to allow for a longer period of time between qualifying and the election, providing for severability, the repeal of the laws, in conflict, codification, and an effective date. Linelda, do you want to take this?
Yes, this proposed ordinance, we discussed it at the August 3rd meeting, and you all agreed that to modify the qualifying period to the second Tuesday in November and ending on the fourth Tuesday in November. So this ordinance is before you as a first reading for adoption.
Okay, is there any comments on it? Just if there are, just jump in.
I think we have to do it, or we will have issues with the supervisor of elections,
I
which we
guess
don't want to do.
I think the expression is we ain't got no choice.
That about covers it.
So we need a motion to accept it and move forward.
I move that we accept ordinance number 2021
It's just a proposed ordinance.
proposed ordinance.
Yes.
Number 2021 what?
We won't assign a number until it come back as a second reading.
Oh, okay.
So you
Just
just say,
2021.
you could actually say you make a motion to adopt item 8A.
Fine. I make a motion to adopt item 8A.
Thank you.
We have a second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Moving on, there are no consent agenda items. Moving on to unfinished business. Can be found on page 17. The discussion on the introduction to the revised ordinance regarding the right-of-way. John, I'm going to turn this over to you. You were the one that was championing this from the beginning.
Well, there's been some changes. They've been detailed here. I read through all of the changes that were made with a lot of resident input, working closely with the town manager. A lot of it was associated with definitions, and I see no reason not to accept this. I think the job actually of the few edits were, I think, reasonable and good, and I support it.
Okay,
If I could, procedurally, if the commission is of the like mind as Commissioner Shoemaker, when you'd like to move forward, the traditional protocol would be then to direct this to the planning board for their comments and recommendations, at which point it would come back on a first read to the commission after the planning board has an opportunity to look at it and give their comment.
okay.
Okay.
Do we have any comments from
I
the
do.
commission?
Okay. Right at the beginning of this, where it describes swale, I would put in that it, where am I? Okay, right of way, which is not either a bike path, sidewalk, or roadway, that it says stores and conveys. I would say can store and/or convey stormwater, because just the fact that it doesn't right now doesn't mean that it can't, and it should be covered.
John, you okay with that? It's your baby.
Can store and
And I would say and/or convey. It shouldn't have to be both. Because sometimes it will be a conduit without actually storing it.
but it needs to do both. And some of them will need to do both.
Yes.
It'll
but
store
that-
it and then it will convey it through the system.
Yeah, but that's why you have all the and/ors, because it gives you all those options.
Just
Yeah.
takes it to another level.
That's fine.
Okay, anything else?
Yeah, under 6, it says except to remove,
Under paragraph 6,
actually,
page-
top of page 19, where you say except to remove existing, I would say except to remove and replace.
well, I think we speak
Because you're
about,
telling them they have to, so you should put it there as well.
hold on a second. This is for obstruction of streets, sidewalks, and right of way. So you may not necessarily replace them.
I don't think we want those replaced, do we?
Yeah. I mean, this is all in that section 25-1. And then it moves to 28-7 on site design and standards. So
Well, this was under site design standards.
Right. And it says swales within the right of way should not be altered or modified except to remove just existing trees.
Okay. Because someplace else you're talking about
Replacement.
replacement
That's-
and saying that if you take something out, you got to put it back.
As a matter of fact, I'm looking quickly.
No, if you go back to page 18 on the bottom, last sentence, existing landscaping located within a swale shall not be replaced.
I was just going to point that out to you. That's where that
Yep.
out
Beat you.
is, right? So you can replace you can replace existing tree in the right of way. However, if that tree is in the swale, you cannot. You have to get a right of way permit.
Yep.
Right.
That was it.
Okay. Moving on. Peggy?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I do have a change, and I brought this up before and did further research. And that is, I strongly, strongly feel we have to remove the buttons from this. Because I had
Where-
heard about this.
Can you
Yes, sir.
point out where that is in
Yes,
the
sir, of
write-up,
course.
please?
And I mean, this is great. This is really great work. It's nothing to do with the overall.
Yeah, we're just kind of
Portion of it.
fine tuning now.
So yes, sir. Under the page 18, C, dome shade buttons. I brought this up like 2 years ago because we continue to see around town people installing wooden stakes and these concrete pyramids and reflectors. I myself, we put up a fence once years ago, just a little plastic chain link fence that looking back, we probably shouldn't have at my house. But I'm saying that because I had heard from other municipalities that anything in that right of way that we okay can be a liability. And then I went to Home Depot and then I called Lowe's, and sure enough, no one in the county sells these items because of 2 lawsuits. One was in the city of Tamarack in 1986. And the city had an ordinance on the books that allowed these items, and they were sued successfully for $4 million because a person was severely injured or died, I'm not sure. And then in West Palm Beach, the county has, for years, like 18 years, I don't have the exact figure, has stated that these are not lawful and will not be sold in the county. And sure enough, I Googled, Martin County, Indian River, Palm Beach, and Broward. I could not find any municipality in those 4 counties which allowed them, because in Palm Beach County, a skateboarder hit his head on one of these items and died. And so what the county is saying, and I called Lowe's, I said, do you sell these? No, we're not allowed to. Home Depot, no, we're not allowed to. So if we allow these and even allow them existing now in that town, is against our ordinance section 17.2, which says under number 3, placing of certain obstructions in State Road A when a right of way, this is State Road, shall be deemed a nuisance. This is under our nuisance ordinance. These obstructions are reflectors, concrete pyramids, concrete rounds, and wood and PVC poles. The term concrete shall include solid material of any kind. And the term rounds shall include solid material of any shape and is not meant to be limited in round shape. We have to take it out. I don't see why we are including it. And I think that, frankly speaking, the chance of someone hitting their head and dying in our town is remote, but it is possible, or even being injured, or bicyclists. So just take it out. No one else is allowing them by ordinance. I don't think we need a problem. And the ones that are actually appearing in town, I think they need to be removed. That's my strong feeling.
Comment?
Otherwise, this ordinance is really terrific, and everyone's work on it. I can see where it has been fine tuned, and it's a great job by Ingrid and John, and I thank them for that work.
Could I comment on that? I would also like to thank the town manager and Ingrid and working with some residents to go through line by line, word for word on this. I have to admit, on the buttons, I looked at some of the buttons we have here, which are in the Bellito area mainly, along with their wooden stakes and other obstructions that I would definitely consider dangerous. but not necessarily the buttons. They're rounded domes. They're white. They're 4 to 5 inches high off the grass. In some cases, if they don't landscape, they're almost hidden by the grass because they're so low. The intent and the reason why I decided not to have a problem with it is to alert drivers not to go driving over into the swale or to the grassy areas, especially given many times it's wet and muddy. And so they sink down, it causes damage to the landscape. And you can see that on A1A for sure with the trucks and whatnot. It's a mess. And then they drive and pull all that mud onto the road. And for bicyclists, it becomes another, element to be concerned about. So for a bicyclist to fall, hit his head, I mean, that is such a stretch. I just feel, have we gone too far? It's now, if it's a stake, and we have wooden stakes that can go up 6 inches, and they're green and a little black at the top, and then they put them every 10 feet. I mean, that's a problem. Okay, that can puncture the tires, let alone anything else in terms of danger. But on the domes, I appreciate Commissioner Gossett-Seidman. I think that she does a fabulous job at digging into the history, the lawsuits, other towns and what they do. I don't know if in this case, we have to fight over this. I will go with how we all feel about it, one way or the other, but I just wanted to give you the thinking behind it, that it's not unreasonable and it does protect property from an appearance with minimal amount of potential danger.
From that perspective, I don't have an issue with it. What I do have an issue with is if you can't buy it in Palm Beach County, I don't think we should allow it.
4 counties.
Well, yeah, but
Indian
I'm
River,
not
Martin,
concerned
yeah,
about
I
other
understand.
counties. I'm concerned about Palm Beach
I
County.
do have the copy of
which
the
is
lawsuit
where
and the
we
stories which I'll
are.
provide.
And
Yes,
if
ma'am.
you can't sell it here, then perhaps we shouldn't allow it here.
Our ordinances already prohibit all these. This is our standing
All right,
ordinance.
hang in there. Hang in
Yeah.
there.
May I
Ingrid?
just add to that? In case the commission didn't see it in the ordinance, if you go to page 23 of your packets, on the top of the page there, you could see that we say the following improvements are permitted in the public right of way, except as provided in section 17-2(3). Just want to be sure that you're aware that we did reference that section of the code that Commissioner Gossett-Simon just referenced. So just wanted you to be sure that we are aware of it and caught it in the ordinance. Or I should say added it to the ordinance.
Okay. Natasha, anything to add? You
I
you
don't
live
have-
on one of these streets. You have
I don't see why they're necessary, to be honest.
I'm sorry.
I don't see the dome shape buttons as being necessary. I don't really have a strong opinion either way. I mean, it does concern me that the counties don't allow the sale of them. I was not aware of that. So I don't really have a strong opinion, but
Okay. So we have one commissioner, vice mayor commissioner that doesn't have a strong opinion, but kind of leans towards not having them, particularly because they're not allowed to be sold in the county. Another commissioner kind of feels as though because they're not sold in the county, maybe we shouldn't have them.
Plus, I will say that 4 inches high, if you've got a kid on a bicycle or on a skateboard and they lose a little bit of control and the front tire goes into that, they're going flying.
Okay. Appears to me as though we should eliminate them. So please do that.
I'll support it.
Okay. Ingrid, got that? Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'll provide the commission and Ingrid with all of the background so you have it just on file, which is a matter of public record anyway, if I reference it.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Anybody have anything else on this? Okay, let's move forward with that's basically only 2 changes. So let's make those and then turn it over to planning.
Exactly.
Comfortable?
Comfortable.
Could we get a motion to that effect?
So I move, since it's my.
Go right
Go right
ahead.
ahead, John.
I move that we take this planned ordinance as approved with the exceptions noted, that it now go back to the planning for review and I guess the next read. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, just say aye.
Aye.
Okay, let's move on now to unfinished business, item B, which is a continued discussion on the recertification program. It can be found on page 33. And Jeff, if you would come up to the podium, handle the recertification program. And by the way, Jeff, the photo that you took was probably the best photo of me in years. Okay. Well, you've got a backup job if you ever need one, I'll tell you.
Did he get
Thank you
photo
very
credit?
much.
Did he get a lawful photo credit, Mayor?
Yeah, he's got it.
And
Are you referring to the photo that came out in the latest email?
Yeah.
The book mag?
Exactly.
It
That
was, I thought it was a professional photo. I thought it
I
was
think he should
excellent
be
as
our
well.
staff photog.
Jeff did it out by one of the trees right here in the front with his phone.
Nice.
I
But he
think
had it all set up in advance. He checked, where the sun was, had me standing in a great position. It was terrific.
It
Can he be our staff photographer now officially?
Yeah, he's it.
Thank you.
He's got yet another job now. See what happens. Performance is non-rewarding. That's what.
Understood.
Okay, so you want to take us through the changes that you made or what have you?
Yeah, I have a summary here, which it's probably best if I just go through the, I don't think I have to officially read the,
Whatever you're comfortable
the summary.
with.
So if Trish, if you don't mind, if we can just go right to the. Oh, yeah, you did give it to me. Thank you. I feel like this is loud. Okay. All right. So what we did is based on a discussion that we had last time, when we brought this up as a discussion, we went back to the drawing board, met with Marshall, went over some of the notes that we had taken from the previous meeting, from the commission, had a good conversation with Attorney Rubin, and went back to the drawing board and think we put together something that both makes sense and meets some of the requirements or wishes of the commission. I feel like there's an echo here. Anyway, so the first thing, there's really no changes here. We have to change chapter 1 so that it allows us to actually do these inspections. There are really no changes here where we're talking about the recertification of the building and components, how we have to add definitions and the procedures. So I'm just going to click through some of these. One of the biggest things that didn't change is that we are sticking solely with threshold buildings, which didn't seem to be an issue last time. I don't believe the commission wanted to look at 3-story buildings or other buildings that did not meet the definition of threshold. Okay. Now, here's where we have some changes. This applies to threshold buildings that are 25 years of age and older, and then the recertification went from every 7 to every 10. However, once the building reached 40 years of age, then the recertification changes to every 7 years after that. And of course, I would have to put together a completion schedule, and obviously looking at the oldest dates, the oldest buildings first. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to, just like last time, notify them 365 days in advance that before their report is due. Now, the 365 days isn't before they have to have it done, but this is before their report is due. So we give them a whole year basically to get the report done. Okay. And then the building owner will then submit the report from the structural engineer and the electrical engineer. And these engineering reports require minimal basic information that are established by the ordinance. We're not telling them how to do their job. We're telling them what, at a minimum, they need to provide in their report. Otherwise, there's no point. Now, the review is to determine whether or not the report satisfies the requirements. This is solely an administrative review just to make sure that they meet the requirements of the ordinance. We're not looking at it from a technical standpoint because the report is coming from an engineering firm. All right. The town at no point, and I put this in red, determines whether or not a building is safe or unsafe. That's always going to be the determining fact decision of the engineering firm. Therefore, the condition is determined by the engineers. Now, major or critical deficiencies must be highlighted by the engineer, and a repair time frame has to be given by the engineering firm. So again, the town isn't saying, hey, you have X amount of days initially. We're saying the engineer has to say, well, if this is critical, maybe we have to do it shoring immediately. Maybe we have to get this done within 60 or 90 days. That's up to them. The owner has 30 days to resubmit a report if the report didn't satisfy the requirements. Let's say they got an engineer who didn't follow the requirements. It didn't meet, and our administrative review is not compliant with it. We're going to say we have to let them know in writing, hey, your report doesn't satisfy our minimum requirements administratively, and they have 30 days to resubmit. If they resubmit it 3 times and it's still not compliant, we would then go through the town's code enforcement procedures. Okay. If they're not happy with the code enforcement procedures at this point, they would have to go directly to Palm Beach County, to the circuit court. Okay, so at no point anymore would the commission be involved hearing any component of this. Well, pretty much said it right there already. All right. Previously, we were given the authority to witness and know in advance and perform, hire an engineer to do our own inspections if need be, or supervise what they were doing. We took all that out. That's all gone. You're going to do the inspection. It's up to you, as long as you meet the minimum criteria of what we expect to be inspected. Time frame. Once the deficiencies are marked, of course, unless it's critical or a major structural problem, the owner now, instead of having 180 days, has 365 days to correct the deficiencies. So when you really look at this timeline, we're going to send a notification out and say, hey, you have 1 year to give us a report. And then they have another year to complete. So this is turning this into a 2-year turnaround from the time that they're notified, right? If we look at this timeline. So the engineer re-inspects the corrected deficiencies and submits a report at the end. But again, all of that is being done under a building permit anyway. All right. Now, the building official may extend the deadline, but if the extension is denied by the building official, the owner must take it to the circuit court of Palm Beach County. In the past, we were having them go back to the commission for an extension of time. So if you don't agree, if let's say I give them 90 days and then I give them another 90 days and then they want another 90 days and I say, no, you have to go to the county and file with the circuit court. Len, I'm on target here with this, right? Okay, thank you. I'll make sure. And but none of this takes away the right of the building official through the Florida Building Code to utilize unsafe structures and equipment under Section 116. So if at any point something is unsafe or becomes more unsafe, we have the right to move forward with Section 116 of the Florida Building Code. Now, I may seek an order of enforcement via the local ordinance, and they have the right to an appeal. If they do make an appeal, it has to be within 30 days. And the only option for the owner is solely with the Circuit Court of Palm Beach County. So at this point, the way things are set up in the town, if we have administrative issues where they don't comply, they just didn't hand in a report, or the report was rejected 3 times. At this point, I have to take them in front of our code enforcement board versus a special magistrate. And that's it. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, let's kick it through. John, let's start with you, and then we'll just work it through.
Okay. So I thought a pretty good job overall capturing, I think, the essence. I have 2 main concerns. And the first one is you state a professional structural engineer. Now, I've been around engineers all my career. There's all types of engineers. And just because they have engineer in their title doesn't mean they're the right engineer. And they could even have an architectural engineering background, but not a structural background. Or, and I believe the more correct reference, correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's a special inspection engineer for buildings, or a threshold special inspector of buildings, a TSI and an SI. And I think those titles are important to add here and even define in terms of credentials. Because I think the last thing we want to do is rely on, an engineer, quote, who makes a report that, yeah, it might look good, but he doesn't have the expertise, the credentials, track record, even though we've talked about, it's got to come from a professional organization. It can be a professional. So that's my first concern. Comments?
Sure. So that actually is a great catch, and that's a very valid point. What I am going to point out to you is that under the licensing laws of the engineers, within their own rules and regulations, they have to be a special threshold inspector in order to even perform that job. So that component is already covered under federal state statute. In addition, that's something we could always add in, but that's something that we're going to check, because when we get the report and whoever signs it, we're going to be going to the DBPNR to make sure that they're not just an engineer, because when you pull them up with engineering, with DBPNR, it has their name and all their information. And then below that, if they are a special inspector, it will be listed.
But see, I'm more concerned about, you don't want to follow up with that after the fact. You don't want to get that surprise. Stated up front,
Okay.
Embedded in this, the state does it, the Fed does it, whoever. Those are credentials we absolutely require, mandated.
We'll be absolutely happy to be more proactive about that.
And I'm not beating you up on it, I'm just saying.
No,
To me,
that's
it's a definition.
that makes sense to me.
All right, the second thing is, you use the word resubmittal, the third resubmittal. So if I go back through the time frame, we give them a year's notice, then they have a year to do it, and then they start their first submittal. Or is it just the first, it's their report, and then they have a resubmittal for the first time, second time, third? That's actually 4 submittals. And with each submittal is more time.
Excellent point, actually. So it would be the initial submittal plus the first 2 submittal was the intent. So a grand total of 3 submittals altogether.
Yeah, that's not
So
what it says.
I don't think we'll have a problem clarifying that.
Perfect. Those are my 2 big issues. Other than that, great job putting this together. And my only last comment would be, pass it on, as I assume that legal has reviewed this and confirms that we don't have legal exposure here when decisions are made either by the special inspector or the building department or Joe Schmo.
Yeah. Yeah.
Got to be careful with Joe. He comes out of nowhere.
I mean, Jeff and I did talk about this at length. as revised, we're pretty much out of it. So all we're doing is reviewing what other engineers have done just to make sure it meets our requirements, which is really no different than what we do in all other phases of code enforcement and building code enforcement. So generally the liability, there would be no liability because it's just a governmental function for which the town's immune.
I had the same question that John did over this. And rather than have a condo hire somebody who we are not going to accept this report from after they've now spent $10,000 or $15,000, perhaps we should say licensed as a TSI or SI by the state of Florida, so that they know exactly what kind of an engineer they have to hire and what their qualifications have to be. Because I don't want to have them guessing.
No, and that was I think that was a very good comment. And we will clarify that.
Now, okay, I got a couple other things. Nothing terrible.
I hope not.
Okay, in section 3, 110.9, under A, on definition of building age, first sentence, I would put, since the issuance of the original certificate of occupancy, as opposed to a certificate of occupancy.
Providing we can find a certificate of occupancy.
But you have that qualification. Yes, absolutely. You've got that qualification in here.
Did you notice the
But-
stall in the response?
Yeah.
No, but I understood that, if we can find it, absolutely. If we can't, we do the taste test and see how old we think this thing is.
Well, one of the things that we've been doing, and again, this isn't a county program, but the countywide conglomeration of what we're putting together separately from what we have and what Boca is proposing. One of the things that we are relying on is the county to notify the municipality of what buildings and what age. So right now we're utilizing PAPA, we're utilizing the county's tax assessor's office to determine the age. And that's how I put together that list. So, right. And I think maybe from even a liability standpoint, to get that information directly from the county, it might help us because now we're not trying to search through records that may not exist.
Well, and I agree. One of the best ways to find age is when did they start taxing them?
Right. But I agree when we do have good documentation, that initial certificate of occupancy would make the most sense. But for the construction of the building, because there are times when a building will change hands and change uses and get a certificate of occupancy, and it may not have had one initially because of the age. It's, again, so I just want to be cautious.
Look, if it's off a year, 2 years,
Yeah,
on
I
a
mean,
40-year-old building, it's not going to make
Right.
a difference.
No, hopefully not.
Okay. The timing. 25-year-old building must get a recertification, and then again in 10 years. That makes it 35, which is then still under another 10-year, which brings it out to 45 as opposed to 40. And I have a problem with that math. Also, somebody suggested to me, an engineer, by the way, a TSI, that you might want to have it coincide with the painting schedule of these buildings, because once you've got scaffolding in place, you don't necessarily want to have to put it up again, because scaffolding is expensive to put up. And in order to be able to investigate a lot of these things, you do have to have scaffolding. If you've got balconies that go all the way around, that's fine. You
they're
can
not-
walk and look, but if you don't,
They're not using scaffolding for this. They use drops. And they're far less costly.
Swing stages.
Yeah,
Swing
so-
stages, exactly.
In a perfect world, having it coincide with the painting schedule hypothetically sounds good, but the problem is a lot of these inspections and a lot of when these things are due, the fact that they're going to have to do the restoration is going to require a new paint job anyway. And then going back to the math component of it, some of these buildings, they may be getting their first certification with us at age 51, at age 43. So to me, it's I'm okay. And to me, it makes sense that if you get it at 20, let's say we have a younger building, it gets its first one at 25, it gets its next one at 35, and by ordinance, it has 10 years. So the next time it's 45. And then now that it's 45, the next one is going to be at 52, because now we're going to go into the 7.
Yeah.
So not all of them are going to be looked at on, the 40 and the 50, because we're all over the place with everything right now.
Okay.
The other thing is, obviously not a perfect world, but we're coming from no recertification.
Right.
Got it.
So.
Okay, then my next question goes into when you say they have a year to get the work done. What work? Because I've seen reports where they will say, okay, come back and look at this in another 5 years or another 2 years. Let's take another look. I mean, if it's not something that the report says must be dealt with sooner rather than later, I don't think we should give them a sooner deadline.
Okay, so it is my understanding that when they have 365 days to complete repairs, those are the repairs that are spec'd out as required and necessary by the engineering firm. We're not giving them, for unrelated items or things that they may want to do or something separate. If they want to have 2 separate reports, if they want to have, a wish list from the engineering firm, and then this is solely about the recertification and keeping the building safe. So in my opinion, the way I interpret this is that they have 365 days to complete the repairs that were found as necessary by the engineering firms.
Okay, that's fine. I think initially we have to give a little leeway because you've got buildings all over the place now that are going to they need bids, they need engineers, and all of these companies that do the work and are giving bids are going to be stretched very thin. And I don't know that this time frame is going to hold up.
A year is good?
But under normal circumstances, if we had been doing this all along, yeah, I would say it probably would. But what I'm saying is, if you have a limited number of companies that can do this work, and I know, for example, in my building, we have to have 3 bids. Well, you may have to wait a little while for a company to come in and give you a bid. So between them giving the bids and you're giving the contracts to your attorney to review, it could eat up a whole bunch of time. If you were doing it at a time period where I'm looking at it and then 6 months later, somebody else is looking at it, you've got more flexibility.
So what are you suggesting? Like 18 months?
No, I'm suggesting that as of right now, maybe we should put it into effect starting 5 years from now. But unless something is absolutely, the building is in terrible shape, I don't think we should put a time limit in, because a lot of these buildings aren't going to be able to get it done in that time period. And you don't want to have them in violation, because then if you give them a pass on it, somebody else down the road is going to say, oh, gee, you let that one go. Why aren't you letting me go? And we do right now, because everybody is looking for these engineers and everyone is looking for contractors, and contractor could be scheduled out for years at this point.
Yeah, but honestly, just as a quick response, I don't think we should extend a year. And in situations where they've waited 6 months to get the bids back and then made a decision, or even 9 months, then it takes another 6 months. So now they're going to be 3 months beyond. In the meantime, they're going to be talking to you. And we're going to approve their construction plan if that's the issue. Is that not right?
That is correct. And Commissioner David, that's actually an excellent point, is the availability of these people. So that's why I'm of the opinion that once we start rolling this out, we it's going to be apparently up to me to start putting together a schedule that we're going to have to implement in stages based on the ages of the building. So by the time this all gets rolled out, some of the buildings that are maybe 25, 26 years old now that are due, they're going to be last on the list. They may have 5 years by the time we get there. So the other component is we're giving them a 1-year notification before even their inspection is due. So if they can get their inspection done in 4 or 5 months, let's say in 6 months, now they have a year and a half really to. Well, no,
I'm sorry to interrupt,
Yeah,
but
you're
I
right.
have to.
Yeah,
I thought we agreed that the clock starts.
with the report. Yes, sir.
when
You are correct.
When you send the letter.
Thank you for the correction. You are correct.
Because I know I spoke to an engineer for my building, several people on the board did. And he told us that basically it would take a minimum of a year and a half between his doing his inspection and then somebody else doing something else and his recommending companies for bidding and then actually doing the minimum of a year and a half, quite probably 2.
Okay, but slow down a minute. And we're missing, I think, a very key point here. We're focused on life safety issues. Those are the issues that have to be dealt with in 365 days, not the pretty issues. So you got a safety issue. And we're saying, if you can't deal with a safety issue in 1 year,
You've got a problem.
you got a major problem here.
Yeah, no, that part I agree
And
with.
that's all we're talking about.
That's it. That's it.
In my view, one of the reasons for doing this is because you have a lot of buildings that don't want to spend the money on an engineer. And they don't want to look at the problems that their buildings have. And I just want them to know what the issues are. I want them to tell their unit owners, this is a problem with our building. We need to do something. And because right now, a lot of buildings don't. They wait till it's way past the time when they should have done anything. So I just want them to know they have to do something. They can't just let it slide for 40 or 50 years.
But they're already identified. They're on the list, and we only really have 15 or so that needs kind of immediate attention. They got 2 years in total to get this done. If it's a life safety issue, it's
No
got to
question.
be
It
right
means-
away.
No question if it's a life safety issue.
Look, at much
But-
of the work, I'm sorry to interrupt you, I apologize, but much of the work when you have a life safety issue isn't a year's worth of work. It's possibly the first 3 months. Now you don't have the life safety issue. Now we got to paint this stuff now. We've got to refill. We've got to do other work. But now it's not life safety anymore. At least we've shored up the building so nobody's going to get hurt. That's the important stuff. After that, Jeff's kind of out of it. And we as a commission aren't real concerned, but our concern is the safety issue. And you're right. Jeff told me a couple of horror stories about some buildings. One was an electrical issue. The other was a condition, of the building that is just possibly not stable. And that's our obligation to get in there. And after the inspection, if it truly is an issue where they got 6 months and then the issue is, Jeff's going to have to close up the building. God forbid.
On electrical, point of clarification. Does the electrical inspector go into each apartment and certify the electrical system in each apartment or just for the building in general?
It's for the building and the common areas.
Okay, because
Yeah.
that
No one has to go in
that could
it.
be a whole different can of worms.
But that's the checking
major
the
things.
electrical panels, the main raceways for
Right.
all of the electrical, that they have to check the lighting outside. They have to check the elevators, wiring, and also probably the key component is the generator for backup electricity. Those are the major areas, and ensuring that the wires are not corroded, obviously. But no, as I understand it, they don't go into the units.
Not for the electrical. They will have to for the structural because they have to look at each and every one of the
balconies, of course.
Right, balconies and windows.
Yeah, balconies and windows,
That-
but
but-
that's about it.
Yeah, but
Electrical, no.
That's, even though it's your balcony, it's part of the common building. So
Yes.
it's, yeah, it's a gray area, so it's not quite the same. Okay, remedies. What we're doing really is bookkeeping, basically. You know, we want them to say, and it may be an issue having some of these inspectors say the building is safe or not safe, because a lot of them aren't going to want to go there apparently. But that we can deal with at a different point. But if you're saying you're rejecting something because they didn't file their paperwork correctly, one, I would hope that we could work with them on filing the paperwork correctly. I mean, this is not talking about work done, it's paperwork, which is a little different in my view.
Just a paper Nazi, right?
Yeah. But on top of that,
The
I mean,
paperless now.
if they can't get their paperwork filed correctly, I would hate that it would come to the point of a lawsuit. I would really like to see something before they actually wind up before a magistrate or a special, yeah, that's a little drastic in my view.
I agree. And I think that that could be an issue, but it's not just a paperwork. Part of the verification of the administrative is to make sure that they followed our guidelines, because I don't want to get a report where they only looked at the balconies, but they didn't look at anything else. That's a problem, because now they're sending off on just the balconies. Well, you didn't meet our minimum criteria, because you have to look at, the support columns, the garage, all these other items. That's more or less what's in my mind that's going to come. I'm not talking about you didn't dot something, you didn't cross your T. No, we're talking about that they didn't
Inspect everything.
inspect the areas that they were supposed to inspect.
Okay. Now, when we send out this letter telling them they have a year to do this, will we include a list of what they have to look at, including but not limited to?
So they're going to have to comply with the ordinance without us providing documentation. We're not telling the engineers how to do their job. We're not, but we do have to tell them at a minimum what they have to look at. So they have to know that
That's
they're
what
looking
I'm
at
saying.
structural,
You've got to
electrical.
look at, the columns, the pilings, whatever it is that they're built on. Yeah, I want them to know so that they don't have to come back and you say, well, but you didn't look at this.
And everything will be in the
Yeah,
ordinance.
I want them to know exactly so that they can give this to whatever engineering company they hire. So these people know what they have to look at.
But that's what a TSI and an SI do. That's their job. I mean, they know enough. It's
Yeah,
like,
I understand that, but I also know dealing with condo boards that if the board can convince this company to do something for less money and not necessarily look at everything they need to look at, a lot of times they're going to do it. So we need to tell them what we want in this report so that you're not sending it back to them. That's a lot of back and forth if you have to reject something. It's a pain in the rear end, quite frankly, for us as well as for them. And if we could eliminate that, then I would rather eliminate, let them know upfront what it is you are looking for at a minimum. If they do more, that's wonderful. If they keep sending it back and we go to code enforcement because they haven't done it, what's the fine?
Well, I guess that's going to be determined, because we don't have a fine schedule set up yet for this particular potential ordinance.
Yeah, I mean, because you go to code enforcement and they usually impose a fine. You violated this and here's a fine. But yeah, but you can't say, we order you, I mean, I shouldn't say that. You can't say, we order you to do this, and they could say, that's nice.
Okay, for the record, Len's response was, I'll tell him, it's up to $250 a day.
Okay, just so, there too, they need to know that. You have X amount of time, you can have time to redo it if you leave something out. And then if it goes to code enforcement and they find you guilty, it's up to $250 a day.
There's
And
no-
if you
there's no
don't like
reason
it, then you can go to the
There's
magistrate.
no reason it should ever get there. I mean, they should get Jeff on the phone and say, what am I missing? He'll tell them what they're missing and they should get it done. I mean,
But, and it's already written for
That's in an
$250
all
a day.
perfect world, they
In
should
perfect
get it
world.
done.
That's already part of the code.
It doesn't always work that way. Okay, I think that's it.
Did
okay,
you have
we'll move
extra
on.
coffee today? Is that
You know, maybe I needed extra.
I think she had a double espresso before you came in. Peggy, move it down to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I wondered if Mr. Remus could explain how the different state and county ordinances will weigh in when they are adopted and enacted. And the reason I say this is the state legislators are already meeting to form committees and committee heads and so forth, and they are discussing 20 years, not 25. So therefore, if you could explain to the public and us how that would work, regardless of how they end up with their dates in the county.
Yeah, absolutely. That's an excellent point. So the first thing is that I'm going to work our way up. What we're doing at the county level is trying to put together a model ordinance for all municipalities to adopt if they choose to, and amend it however they choose to fit their particular jurisdiction. Okay. It is not a county ordinance that will be mandated. That's not going to happen. And I've been told that by the commissioners and at the county at these meetings. So no one has done anything. Everything else in the past has been at the county level, Broward, Miami-Dade. So what we're doing is we're collectively with 40 different building officials. And now this Thursday, we're going to present this to engineers. So according to, and I keep forgetting his name from Richard Ratcliffe. Yeah.
Oh,
What he said is everyone's going to want what we put, he wants to make something that's as perfect as possible that everyone else is going to want and use as a model, because we're taking what Broward did and we're expanding on it. We're refining it, making it better. We're getting feedback from engineers. Once we get the feedback from the engineers and we refine it, we're going to take it in front of the stakeholders, such as the building owners and so on and so forth, to give us more feedback so we can refine it again. That is an option down the road once it's completed for the town to either say, hey, we want it, we're going to edit it, or we want it like it is, so we're consistent with everyone else. If the state decides to work on something, I don't think it's going to come out for a while. I know the International Code Council is working on something, which means that they'll probably work in combination with the Florida Building Commission. And if at any point, maybe for this next code cycle, which will come out for 2023, for 2023 will be the new code cycle. Maybe by then they'll have something, and that would supersede what we can have things that are more restrictive, but we wouldn't be able to have anything in place that is less restrictive. So at that point, the only thing we would have to do is whoever made it through our system, and let's say in 3 years there's a change, or 2 years there's a change, well, they won't have to, when they're due down the road, that'll be the gray area with, well, we complied with what you wanted 2 years ago. Now you're telling, well, now it's a state issue. Now it's out of our jurisdiction. It goes to the state. So as of now at the county, it's going to be elective. And because it's not a state mandated, you could make what comes from the county either less or more restrictive. But when the state comes down, that's when we're going to have the gray area. But at that point, I think if we have something in place that makes sense, I don't think it's going to be, too hard for us to say, yeah, no, you have another 10 years before yours is due. And I'm sure, and I'm hopeful that the legislators and whoever the state puts together on these committees recognizes that there may have already been some systems in place, such as Broward, Miami-Dade, town of Highland Beach, city of Boca Raton, and whoever else may have put something in place.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Secondly, the League of Cities is looking to include structures such as shopping malls, public places. So I know we have limited of that, but if you could address that position too.
So the at the countywide, we're pretty much following exactly what was done with Broward County. So it's any commercial buildings, which is basically anything that's not a 1 or 2 family dwelling or townhouse. If it's not a 1 or 2 family dwelling or a townhouse, it's commercial. So any of those commercial buildings that are greater than 3,500 square feet would also be included. And that has been included in Miami-Dade, in Broward, and that's what is moving forward here in Palm Beach County for the model ordinance. We're not addressing those smaller buildings here. But that could also be a 3 or 4 unit apartment building that's only 3 stories in height. We could have a 6 unit apartment building here that's, 45 feet tall and 3 stories, and it's not included in our ordinance because we're solely looking at threshold.
Got it. Thank you. And I do think a special magistrate is a super idea because that would be more efficient. I wonder, since the commission isn't directly involved in this process, if there would be a way of formalizing, keeping us posted. Would it be in your regular reports? But I would think we are going to be very active in this area in terms of keeping watch on it. So
Well-
is there a method of keeping us posted?
Well, yeah, I think administratively, we can just provide a report, just like we provide any other report to the town manager. Like, the town manager can easily say, this is what I want from you and this is what we do.
Great, thank you.
Not a
And then
problem.
one other thing, I know in the Surfside situation, the Miami Herald released a study that they had hired engineers independently to look at, and the portion of the building that fell down was not built to code, to plans. And the portion that remained standing was in fact built to plans in terms of the pilings and the footers and so forth. And so I'm wondering, as they move forward with who's to blame and who messed up and all of the decisions, the town, the building people, the residents for not putting into the reserve and so forth. But as they move forward, do we know of any buildings that specifically were not built to plans? Is there any kind of a file that we have in our archives where there are buildings that we should be worried about based on their plans? Or do we just not have everything?
We don't have everything and we're not aware. And at this point, once it's been built and has a certificate of occupancy, we are hands off that. So and that's not I don't think that that's something that we would want to tackle.
No.
Got it. Thank you. I appreciate all your hard work on this. This is a complex matter. And I do think, as a final comment, the legislature hopes to have parameters set forth by the end of session, which would be, I think, the end of March. They are aiming for that because, of course, the whole state, the whole world has watched what happened.
Okay,
Thank you.
Natasha.
I think it all looks really good. I don't really have much more to add to the process, but just more of a question. You were talking about you're going to have to develop a schedule of how you look at the buildings and things. Is that just going to be purely based on age of the building?
It would be my preference that I be extremely objective for the purposes of liability to the town and solely look at the age of the building as reported by the county to us, and not try to bring any subjectivity into it. That'd be my opinion.
I guess, so how about these buildings that go through concrete restoration? Like, do they normally, does what you're looking for on this recertification, is that part of their process when they go through the concrete restoration?
So the concrete restoration is a separate permit. And there are so many different levels of concrete restoration, whether it's just balconies, exterior envelope. There are some that are doing exterior public walkways, balconies and repainting, but they're not doing garage ceiling, or maybe they're doing garage ceiling and repair one time. And then 2 years later, they plan on doing, they're breaking things up so that they don't have this massive financial burden all at once. And it's a completely separate animal because there's different levels, whereas this recertification is solely on, is the building safe? Is the building properly maintained? Are there any, major deficiencies, critical, deficiencies that need to be addressed in order to keep this building safe?
Could I add to that in our case, when we had, multi-million-dollar restoration project, we did get an engineer
We did look at post-tension cables on the balconies, and we did look at the window seals, and we did the outside envelope of, the stucco and repair and the roofs. But we didn't do any electrical engineering inspection at all, really. So it was much more limited. We're still looking at life safety here that involves below the ground, above the ground, electrical. It's a complete package.
Because I just wonder, like, if a building didn't have, and maybe this is too subjective, and I understand the age requirement. I do think that makes sense, but I just wonder if you have a younger building that didn't have a thorough concrete restoration, should they be moved up in the priority list, or no? You just think it should be based purely on age?
I would think that they would, but that would also require that we have extremely accurate, thorough record keeping for decades,
Okay.
which may or may not exist at this time, but
Okay.
certainly exists the last few years.
I have another question. What about the sewer lines in the building? Sorry, sewer lines in the building. I mean, to me, that's a life safety issue, because if your sewer line breaks and you've got sludge all over the place, this is a health issue.
So you're right. That is a health issue, but it's not a structural stability issue. So as important as that is, I don't think that that's something that's going to be addressed. And a lot of the buildings they're doing a lot of relining right now.
Yeah.
A lot of buildings in order to save money. But that's not something that is a structural stability. We're looking at structure and electrical safety. But that's something that when something like that happens, they're taking care of it immediately. And we can't predict when something is going to fail.
It's not life safety, but it's life misery.
No, I understand that, but also I do know that these lines, it doesn't take all that long for them to become almost blocked.
It's no fun, but it's not life.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Jeff,
Yes, sir.
great job. I applaud you. Great job. Huge progress here. But
Here we come.
you made two errors. One, you complimented my associate down at the end here.
I do that intentionally to drive you crazy.
I know you did. I thought we had an agreement here. Wait a minute. On page 39, which is page 6 of the write-up here, it's actually in the first paragraph, about halfway down. Talk about for major structure elements such as foundations, masonry bearing walls, steel framing systems, roof systems, and concrete framing systems, manual forensic inspection, methods such as chipping small areas of concrete and surface finishes for closer examination shall be required. Other than this specific requirement, what you're thinking on this? Why are these
In it?
required? Why are we saying these shall be required?
Well, it says that the report shall discuss what method that they use. We're not telling them, but we're saying what method did you use? And if you used a more invasive, such as chipping away or needs for, we need to know, we just want to know what type of inspection you did perform. It's saying that the report shall discuss the use of the following structural inspections. And that's all they want you to do. And then now it said, methods, it does say shall be. That part skipped through. That shouldn't say shall.
Oh, so that shall be required shouldn't be in there then? Maybe required.
Yeah,
Or
maybe required, or, if was performed, but we're not going to make that determination. The engineering firm is going to make that
right,
determination.
so we need to reword that then.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. If I skip over to the very next page. It's in the second paragraph, again, kind of in the middle, starts with respect to non-major or non-critical deficiencies, the structural engineer or electrical engineer as applicable Asserts cannot be corrected within the 365 days. The building official may approve an extension, timeframe, et cetera, et cetera. So this is dealing with non-major, non-critical deficiencies. Well, why are we putting a time frame on that? What's the thinking there? So these are not life safety issues.
We don't have to, but you don't want them to say, well, we're going to take 10 years to fix the building now.
We'll get around to it. So.
And we're going to wait. We'll get around to it when we want to. I still think that if you're going to have an ordinance that you're going to enforce for the safety of the building, because a lot of those non-structural, non-items may become,
Yeah.
and that,
Well,
they're going to, it's just going to get worse.
That's kind of what I was guessing.
Yeah.
That today it's not a structural issue, but if you don't deal with it in 2 or 3 years or 5 years, and we're not really coming back to look for another 7 or 10 years, depending.
All right.
So that's what your thinking was?
That's the thinking. And the other component is when you speak with anyone who does any inspection or engineer who does an evaluation, their evaluation is based on that point in time. And time changes everything.
Yeah. So this might be, for example, a stucco issue that obviously is not a big deal right now, but if you don't deal with a stucco issue, eventually you're going to have a problem because the water is going to get inside, and then we know what happens when water starts getting inside.
100%.
Okay, so that's what the thinking is there.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Okay. Do you think we should articulate that so when people read this, they get an understanding of that? That's a question. I'm not suggesting we do it or don't do it.
But you could note that, you could determine that there are issues that could become a problem for
Yeah.
life safety in the future.
Yeah, it
I
could be
think
a
it's
simple
reasonable
thing
add.
as these issues can become life safety issues down the road.
So
If we wanted to say that.
I will get with Attorney Rubin and find out if language such as that would be appropriate for an ordinance versus something like that being on paperwork.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it is or it isn't.
Yeah, I would think it shouldn't be in the ordinance because there too, just because something could become an issue doesn't mean you want to tell them, okay, it could become an issue, so therefore you have to fix it now.
Yeah.
And I have a problem with putting time limits on things. It's kind of like you get an X-ray and they say, okay, watch this, come back in
Yeah.
2 years or 3 years.
We'll keep an eye on your hip.
Right, yeah,
Right.
exactly,
Yeah, I get you. Yeah.
What we're asking for right now really is a baseline view with these buildings.
Yeah, no, but
So
you're
that
right in
when-
what you're saying, that if you don't deal with it now, it's going to be more costly later and it could become a life safety issue. So I get it and I agree. I just don't know how we get people to agree and take care of it.
Well, but at some point, we can't be big brother to everything.
Right, right.
You
Yeah.
know, you can say, look, do this, and maybe we can keep some sort of a note in our records and a tickler system of some sort where you say, look, this came up 3 years ago or 4 years ago. Have you looked at it
Have you taken
again?
care of it yet?
Have you fixed it or have you looked at it? Or,
But to force
Something-
them and then fine them
yeah,
if they
I
don't do
wouldn't
it,
force them and I
et
wouldn't
cetera,
fight.
when it's not a life safety issue, I think that's stepping overboard. I think that's going over the line. Although it's the right thing to do for themselves and for their building. And you would do it in your building. I know John would do it. I would do it. You would do it on your homes because you know it's going to cost you more in 5 years than now. But I don't know that it's our place to force people to do it.
I don't think it is our place personally.
Yeah.
But
So let's think about it. Okay. That's all I had. Otherwise, I think it's a huge progress and I think we're just about there.
So what is the next step?
Make the adjustments and let's go into a first read.
So do you want us to make an attempt at adjustments, bring it back as though we are doing a first read?
Please.
Okay.
And the other thing, just to update, I was on a Zoom call and Commissioner Vice Mayor Weinroth was on that. And we were talking about what we were doing here for this. And he again stated, as he did during the coffee with the mayor, that the county was just preparing a series of recommendations, as you were saying, and that in his opinion, the state would end up doing pretty much the same thing. So we're in good stead doing our own thing. And as John, as you were saying, that, if anything, we would be able to go beyond what the state does. So the thing is, we're a barrier island. So whatever the county or the state suggests, theirs has to be for the entire geography, not just barrier island. So there's no way that we would be able to adopt whatever they did, because they're not looking at only a barrier island. Okay. Thank you. Great progress.
All right, excellent.
Anything else on that before we move on? Okay, we have new business, approval of the commission meeting minutes from June 15th and June 22nd. Anybody have anything to comment on those two?
Yes, just a minor thing. On the page 4 of 9 of the June 15th meeting, down in the middle where it says motion, to respond to the city of Delray Beach that the town of Highland Beach does not accept the addition of more new firefighters, and that the town of Highland Beach would ask to have the city of Delray Beach proposed budget change to reflect that. So add a does and a the.
What page is that on again?
Page 47 of our agenda, and it's 4 of the draft.
Okay. Got it.
I have something too. On that same page, just below, it says Town Attorney Torsivia explained, in case either side decides to declare a breach, there is a procedure for a breach, which is a 1-year notice. And then it goes on to say, as of October 1st, 2021. I didn't realize, I guess, is that right? As of October 1, 2021, or is it as of the date?
Every
That we breached.
October 1 is the
October
breach
1.
period. So you could declare a breach, say now, but it doesn't go into effect until October 1. So they get regardless of what happens, they get 1 fiscal year at a minimum to wind down the operation.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that.
Anything else from anybody?
Yeah, I had one more thing on very minor. The page numbers changed, so yeah. Last sentence of my report, lastly, she commended instead of the commended.
Where is that?
That last sentence of the large paragraph, kind
Okay.
of in the middle.
Lastly, she commended?
Yep.
Okay, got it. Sorry about that. It's on page 50.
Oh, okay,
Okay,
yes.
move on to
And the next
What-
page.
the
One
next
more.
one,
Sorry, Mayor.
which would be the June 22nd.
No, I have something on page 51.
Oh.
And
still
when
on
you're
this one.
finished, I have one too, please.
Says,
Okay.
Town Attorney Torsivia spoke about the Palm Beach County Commissioners approving. You need the word about in there.
Okay.
It's a sentence just above adjournment.
Gotcha.
And I have one back on page 7 of 9 of the draft, June 15.
No, we already finished with.
I know,
page
but
7.
okay, no big deal.
No.
I don't care. No, I care. I provided my other corrections yesterday that were already implemented, but I
Okay.
found just a typo. It's not, but at the last statement of my report of that date, it should be or under 400 feet of an airport or just airports. Just take out the an.
Of
It's just
airport, okay.
grammatically
Yeah,
wrong.
like the
Got it.
airport singular.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, can we move on to the June 22nd? Any comments on that? Just jump in if you have them.
Actually, last sentence, it says, the recommendation to be, it is the recommendation.
I made
It
that
says
change.
it is.
In the revised minutes, I did make that change.
Yeah, which we
Yeah,
have
Thank you.
they caught it.
double clock,
Anything else?
double jeopardy.
Okay, can we have a motion? Covers both of them.
I move we accept the draft minutes as corrected.
Got a second?
Second.
Second,
And these are the draft minutes for June 22nd and
June
for
15th.
the 15th. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. Let's move on. Let's move on now to Resolution 21-025. We'll turn that over to Marshall.
Oops, this is for the resolution.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so basically, just to let you know, our funding agreement came from Florida Department of Emergency Management. They're facilitating it for non-entitlement communities such as ourselves, that meaning under 50,000. I signed, they have me as authorized signator for the town to obligate the distribution of funds to us. I went ahead and signed it. I just want your blessing, if you will, to continue to sign American Rescue Plan Act documents as we move forward. There'll be some treasury documents. Matt's got to do an annual report by October 1 to the Treasury Department on how we use the funds. They're going to give us those guidelines. But the best news, as I had indicated to you in an email last week, originally we anticipated we were about $1.63 million. The final numbers came in, we're at $1.961 million. So we got an extra $300,000 we did not initially plan for. So that's good news. And based on all of the uses, we're going to keep those focused in the water and sewer wheelhouse at this point. Now, should something shake loose on the COVID front and we want to do something specific to that, we can use those funds for any type of particular COVID response. Revenue replacements and supplements just don't work for us. But water sewer does, and that it does include storm and anything we want to do towards education and any emergency response related to COVID-19 would also qualify. And we have until December of 24 to spend the dollars.
How about did we pay overtime to the police during COVID? Wasn't there some kind of required overtime?
Yeah, but we did a little bit, but wasn't very little. It wasn't much. And the amount of paperwork to go get it
Forget it, okay,
may prove to be daunting.
got
So
it.
just
got it.
moving forward, we have a replenished capital fund, if you will, to really work on water and sewer and get that lift done. And again, God forbid, we need to do something with COVID for our residents, or we desire to do something just as a service. We have those dollars available for us.
In that case, anything that gets us more money that we don't have to pay back, I'm in favor of. I say we pass this resolution.
I just have a quick question. So why is it that water and sewer, definitely we can attribute funds to water sewer?
So the thinking of Congress, since I'm so close to it, no, just kidding.
Well, that's an assumption.
I think they recognize that a lot of communities weren't as damaged as you would see the impact of some place like a West Palm, a place like Miami. Their impacts from COVID are substantially different than ours. And when they say the American Rescue Plan, I think they wanted to do stuff to inject into the cities the ability to build us moving forward. One, to save us from the COVID economically as a city, bigger municipalities, let's say, smaller ones, we tend to struggle with large capital investments on a regular basis. These funds then would be available to supplement. So everybody, every city, and again, the commissioners that heard Mr. Anthony from the National League of Cities, they really worked hard to make sure cities of all sizes got something as part of this for the first time ever, that local distribution of dollars. So now if some community doesn't get the money or can't use it, it will be redistributed back through the formula. So we could potentially see more if a community chooses not to, or was distributed more funds than they could handle based on some of the formulas for the dollars. But I think they just wanted to cover many different aspects. And I think not every, a community like ours that were based on real estate predominance for our ad valorem tax base didn't see the revenue impacts as hard as some of those larger cities. So, we can't just be doing that, or, the ability for us to do these large COVID responses really fits more to larger municipalities and counties.
Natasha, the simple answer is they limited what you could use the money on.
Right, okay,
Right.
so.
That was the question.
Yeah, so, but I guess the words that I saw that were used were infrastructure. It could be used for infrastructure. So I guess we're thinking that because water and sewer are obviously infrastructure, that's why.
So when I had the pleasure of reading the 150 pages of treasury rules that goes to the use of those dollars, the one thing, while they were at times obtuse to how to use it, they basically said water, sewer, broadband specifically. And they said for water and sewer, they were going to follow the state revolving fund qualification process. Very clear, well-established over time. So when we do a water project or sewer project, we can go to the state and get federal dollars for loans like we did for our water project here. We have a couple of SRF projects, state revolving fund projects. So that makes it clear. The other ones, the formulas, I am telling you, are very complex, and it really went to revenue replacements or communities that have, 4,000 police officers or things of that nature, which to go through that formula to figure out those payments would be very complex. So they said infrastructure, but then they got very specific into how and what type of infrastructure. And they wanted broadband to get people connected to, so should the pandemic, as we expect, would become an endemic, the rural communities are now connected and can work broadband and things of that nature.
As long as we used it.
Yep. And we have enough water and sewer needs for 1.961 over that period of time. So,
And I guess my other question about that, does that free up what we were anticipating to use money for?
we will be revisiting with the water study, a rate study. I think that we are going to have to, because we've anticipated in that all of that capital for which within that time horizon, we're now getting injected with $2 million in that same time horizon. So I think you will cross that path. As Matt had indicated last time we talked about the rate, it's too early to see what that all does. But now that we have that, we're going to go back to, was it Raftalis? Go back to them and say, now that we have this, can we recalculate that? Because there was a 1-year revisit that the FAB and the commission wanted. So let's do our next implementation. But I think the back years of that rate increase go away.
Narrow it down.
I think they really narrow down in years 3, 4, and 5, because that major push of capital needs, and the biggest one was in the sewer, just disappeared on us. So I think we'll find ourselves in a much better position, so we won't need some of those bigger lifts in 3, 4, and 5.
So just to clarify, the question really is, can we take the full 2 million, pay our project on sewers right now, and not touch our budget, nor worry about our $350,000 limitation?
The answer on that's very simple.
No.
Well,
But
I
asked, and it's a
think
question.
I think that would be a commission. I will get you that legal opinion. Glenn and I have had this conversation. I'm saying it out loud because Glenn's going to start looking and thinking, but these are earmarked dollars that aren't ours, specific for a very limited scope of projects. we've had that conversation. Now, there's two ways to look at it. You can be more conservative and say, you know what, we just don't want to do that. But again, on the other hand, again, you're not obligating any local dollars to undertake that project. Not a single dollar is. So that's something that we can work with legal to see what it is, give you that in writing, and then let you wrestle the bigger picture. The perception of that may be stronger than the technical elements, but we'll take a look at that.
I guess it's maybe.
Well, it is a maybe. It depends on how it's interpreted. And frankly, it's like the federal government has given us some money to pay for our sewer system.
Well, it's like a grant. So if we were to get a federal grant for over 350,000, are we saying we can't take grant dollars and do a grant project? What if we get a direct distribution from the legislator, right? And it's over 350, we have to deny it because we didn't get a vote of the residents to spend the money? Because that's not our money. It's somebody else's money for a very specific scope of project. And for us, we truly only qualify for the water and sewer piece. We didn't get hit like many communities did on those other elements that were covered under the American Rescue Plan Act.
And it's clearly being earmarked for a sewer project. It's not like, oh, you need some more cars, you need some more equipment. No, it's sewers. How can you be against that? And the government's paying for it. And it's not our money. We're protecting the town's money. Let's do it and get it done.
It's kind of our kids' money.
Yeah, one of the questions that was asked in one of the lectures that I went to, they specifically said, can we then use this money for something, and the funds we had allocated for that, can we take and use someplace else? And the answer is yes, you can.
So, Mr. Mayor, it's up
Yeah,
to you.
but they're not, none of those other towns have spending limits. That's the only issue we have here to deal with.
Got it.
So that's where legal comes in.
Yeah, they'll get them to render a written opinion, and then the commission can really then focus on the public policy component of that.
Yep. Okay. You got it, Lynn. Anything else before I move on? All good. Okay, next on the agenda.
No.
We need a motion, right?
Yes, I move that we approve resolution number 2021-025.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you for reminding me of that. Okay, let's move on to a reserved discussion from Natasha.
Teresa's going to queue up her presentation. I think she's grabbing the clicker.
So as we're getting set up, as you know, I've been kind of thinking about this, thank you, for a while. And the purpose of this presentation is to kind of share with you what I've found so far. In my opinion, it's a lot to digest. I don't know, it took me a while to digest it. And so I don't know, I'm not expecting any decisions to come out of this. But I'm looking forward to hearing what your initial reactions are. And perhaps this is something that we would continue to talk about in future meetings. It's an intertwined type topic that affects a lot of different things. So here we are. So some of the things that, the things that I looked at are, what are the current level of reserves that we have in Highland Beach. I looked at some of our neighbors, specifically Boca, Delray, Tequesta, North Palm Beach. I wanted other municipalities that had similar exposures that we had, that, were coastal towns or with a lot of coastal exposure. I also wanted to look at towns that had similar budget, a level of budget that we had. I wanted to look at what were some of the best practices that are established by some of the accounting boards. I tried to come up with myself, in my own opinion, what is an adequate level of reserves. And it's something that I think we should discuss and perhaps have the final financial advisory board also take a look at. And so I think this also does have implications for the fire rescue. I think it's a good time to start talking about it. especially with our fire rescue, the build out of the fire rescue coming in the next few years. So the first slide has to do, I'm just comparing what we have in Highland Beach. The first column, all the way to the left, is the Government Accounting Standards Board. They have come up with a standard. They actually came out with a report in February of 2009 of what they were providing as guidance to municipalities as to what they thought was the minimum level of unassigned fund balance that municipalities should have. And considerations that they had in their report were, okay, this is the minimum, 17% of your expenditures is what they are recommending as municipalities hold. But that could vary. You may want to add on if your revenues are, if you get a lot of revenues from commercial payers. Because, you know, for example, if you have a commercial payer, they go out of business, maybe they can't pay. Or maybe your expenditures or revenues are very volatile. If they're very volatile, then maybe, you know, you want to add more in reserves. If you're dependent on state aid or federal aid, then maybe you want to add on reserves. And then, of course, if you are subject to catastrophe or, you know, significant disaster. So that's the leftmost column. And then I started to put other municipalities that I thought we were comparable to. So Tequesta, they have a very similar level of budget. Along the bottom is their annual expenditures. So Tequesta was the one that was the most similar to ours, where they have about a $13 million budget, and they hold the 17%. And actually, as I look through time, there was a year where they dipped below to 14%. And the guidance from the Governmental Accounting Standards Board is if you do dip below, then you should have a plan to replenish your reserves. And it could take up to 3 years. So their 2019 budget, they did get back up to 17%. I actually have 2 columns here for Boca. So Boca, and when I review their budget, they do talk about what their minimum reserves are. And I guess I'll take a step back. So there are a certain portion of your reserves that you cannot touch. It's like restricted. It's already set aside for, so I'm not talking about any of that. I'm talking about what's left over. So Boca, they have 10% of their expenditures is for catastrophes. And then they have another 10%, and I forget what they called it for, but they have a minimum level that they want to keep, which is 20% of their expenditures. Now their budget is 188 million on an annual basis. So even though 20 is their minimum, they do hold, last year, they do hold a little bit, they do hold more. So for the 2019-2020, they were holding 34%. If you look at the projected budget for the 2021, they get back to the 20. So they used some of that money. They were at least planning to use some of that money. And the reason why I'm going back to 2019 instead of using the most recent is when you do your projections, you don't really know what's going to fall out. So that's why I thought it was better to look at the year prior.
This is on top of the 10%.
No, so the 34, so their minimum policy is 20, 10 for catastrophe and 10 for something else. I forget what they called it, but they're actually holding 34. Del Rey, they're holding about 27%, and they have about $140 million budget. North Palm Beach, they consistently hold 30%. And then as I was looking through our documents, we have a policy, and it is basically holding 25%. And it's basically 1 month is for disaster recovery. So 8.3% is for disaster recovery. And then 16.7% is for what's called budget stabilization. And then what we're actually holding is 77% of our expenditures. And so the 25% is basically 3.2 million. And then we have the 6 million, which is on top of that. So here I just kind of summarized the considerations from the accounting board. The other acronym is it's another Government Finance Officers Association. They also provide guidelines, and it's consistent with the Governmental Accounting Standards Board. And so when I read the standards that they have published, like I mentioned, both those organizations recommend 16.7% of expenditures. Highland Beach holds, our policy is 25% of expenditures. And they, as I mentioned, things that you consider as far as how much a town wants to hold is the predictability of the revenues and the volatility of their expenditures. Our revenues and expenditures are fairly predictable. Our revenues, 80% comes from the property tax. So we have pretty low risk of volatility in revenues because it does come from our residential property taxes. And our revenues aren't really dependent on state aid or federal aid. However, we do have a high risk to catastrophe, but we do have insurance policies in place. So the blue line represents the dollars of fund balance. And I basically looked at all the budgets that we had online. So that's why I start with 2003. The shaded line represents the years of recession, which was from like December 2007 through the middle of 2009. The little dollar amounts represent the years with the biggest additions to the 2 years with the biggest additions to surplus. And then I also thought you'd be interested in knowing what are the years with the biggest deductions in surplus. So in 2007, we had $2 million addition. And then the second highest was in 2016, an addition of 1.1 million. And the biggest reductions to surplus came from 2011. So 275,000 was the biggest reduction. And then the second biggest year in reduction is 211,000. So over the 17-year history, we had 12 years of additions to surplus, and we had 5 years of reduction in surplus. So this gives you a feel for the years in which, and the time frame, the 17-year history of the increases in surplus. And so I was looking at what Matt had shared with us with respect to the financing options. And I just wanted to point out that the cost, financing does come at a cost, obviously. Even though the interest rates are low, so the 10-year time horizon was a 1.5% interest rate. The 15 represented a 1.75 interest rate, and the 20 was a 2.3% interest rate, which sounds very low. But I just wanted to bring to everyone's attention that even though those interest rates are pretty low, there is a cost associated with that financing. So, if we were to borrow $4 million, $4.25 million, the cost of that financing is $358,000. And then it goes all the way up. Let's say we did a 20-year and we borrowed almost $6.5 million. That's going to cost the town, $1.675 million. So I wanted us to kind of think about what is the right level of reserves that we want to carry. Right now we're holding $6 million in reserves. It's much more than what our neighbors are holding. It's much more than what the accounting boards recommend. I personally think that 25% is closer to the right number. People have been contributing. I know there's I fully understand the concept of, the fire rescue will benefit a generation of people to come in the future, but we've had a generation of people who've contributed to the surplus, that $6 million surplus that we have. So I would like for us to consider using a good portion, if not all of that $6 million towards the building of our fire rescue. And the benefit of that is it would save us the cost, the expenses with financing. And then I guess I'd also like for us to talk about and start thinking about at what point in time, what level is a level of unassigned that is just, it's too much, it's a lot for us to carry. I was asking, how much do our reserves, earn? And we're earning 0.1% on the reserves that the town is holding. So that's the information that I've gathered so far. I don't know. I guess I'd be interested in hearing your initial feedback and what your thoughts are so far.
First of all, thanks for doing the work.
Oh, sure.
Okay. Very interesting. Nice to see what other towns are in, both large and small. Nice to see the history. And you're right, there's a lot to think about. I guess we can kick it around a little bit. I'd like to have copies of that distributed to everybody. And I think we put it on the agenda for our next meeting so we can discuss it more. This is a topic that once we come to a conclusion on is going to affect the town for many years. So this is not something I think that we decide on very quickly.
Absolutely.
Also, in terms of the financing of the fire rescue initiative, that obviously we don't have to decide on right away as well. By utilizing some or all of the reserves as opposed to financing, we have to make some guesstimates on what those reserves would be gaining in investment, because there's an offset there as well. So it's not all. Right now, basically nothing, because interest rates are so low, but they're not going to be that low long term. But it's a minor offset, but there's some offset there. But let's just kick it around for a few minutes anyways. We'll start down here with John.
So I'm impressed with the numbers. I'd like to know
what was the thinking behind building the reserves with $6 million now that's accumulated. There had to be a reasoning for that. I believe that this town has not experienced a devastating blow from a hurricane, whereas we've seen, 100 miles off the coast in the Bahamas, and the island got wiped out. So as a barrier island, I think, and you detailed part of the reasoning for Highland Beach or other communities, is the fact that we're on a barrier island and the weather can have a devastating impact on us. So I believe that I can justify, again, this is just my reaction, okay? Spontaneous, off the cuff. I can justify a third easily based on the potential for disaster, which would be much more so than I think other communities outside of Florida, or at least the coastal areas. But I also think that we've accumulated enough money that we should take advantage of it for minimizing the amount that we have to borrow for the fire department. I think that puts us in a really good position. And I think that the balance over the term showed that when there's an economic catastrophe, like in 2008, we still didn't take that much of a hit, which is very revealing. Because I personally believe, given that Congress has been flooding us with cash, the inflation has started, and we're going to hit a wall. Now, there's no doubt in my mind we're looking at another event worse than 2008. Now, hopefully it doesn't get much worse than that, but it's definitely coming. But it looks like, even so, the nature of our town ad valorem taxes and the sources leave us in, a pretty stable and strong position. Lastly, I'd like to do a little more homework on the justification of reserves, period, and what really the intent is longer term. Because I know some believe stronger, as I've seen even in our own condo, that, we just rely on your ability to borrow. And so set up a line of credit for emergencies or something like that. And while that gives you a solution, it still comes at a cost. And but we don't want to overburden the carrying of such a high reserve balance for our community that's, giving up their money to support this. So it's a trade-off, it's a balance. Net it out. I think we should use some of the money for the fire, no question. I think we need to understand how we want to allocate monies in the future towards reserves, and how we might lower that. But also at the same time, I don't think we should go down to as low as 25. I wouldn't have a problem with 33%. That's my reaction. Sorry it takes so long.
I believe in reserves. I like the security that it gives me. I like the ability not to have to special assess if there is something horrible that goes wrong. I think we do have more than we need. And yes, I think we should use some of it. I would not use $6 million of it. I think that's taking us down way too low because, we don't have interior places to balance our risk being a barrier island. Some of the other places you were talking about, they have very little of their town on the barrier island. It's mostly inland. I would have to think about how much, but I definitely wouldn't spend as much as the 6. To be honest, I don't really have a problem with having a half a year's reserves so that if something really happens, and I understand that we have ad valorem taxes, But if your values go down and people's earning ability go down, you don't want to be stuck because our costs are not likely to go down. We have costs that, our employees and everything else, those are fixed costs. And the fact that the values of our property go down doesn't change that. It may change how much money we can bring in based on it, unless we increase our rates, which I'd rather not have to do that. So to me, having the reserves there counterbalances that potential. I don't think we need to keep adding the way we have, but I wouldn't take it all the way down either. I think that's not the best way to manage our money.
Peggy?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. I believe a lot of the reason we have the reserves built up, and I've lived here 30 years now this year, a lot of it is that prior commissions just didn't spend money. And that's fine. But we are needing to spend it now. We have the sewer relinings. We have many major projects we're tackling, which I give my colleagues a huge credit for jumping in and doing along with Marshall and Matt. So I think they just didn't spend money. And at the same time, the property values have risen. Then we have the gentrification. We've got these older homes in my neighborhood and throughout town and Oceanside being leveled and rebuilt. And that certainly adds to the property values. In 2008, we didn't have much building at all or rebuilding, but you're right, we didn't take a very, very big hit at that time. So I think those are the major reasons. What I'd be interested in knowing is if we have a worst case scenario storm, what is covered in our insurance policy? If we get a direct hit like Panama Beach a few years ago, of course, their building codes are very lax and a lot of their buildings were wooden structures from the 50s. But nonetheless, what is covered? I would love to know specifically if we took a big hit from a hurricane, and then what else we would need reserves for a big hit. Or what would we need? And keep in mind that the federal government does come in, but FEMA takes a long time. Panama Beach, as I talked to the mayor a year ago about that, their aid came from nearby towns or big towns, Orlando, Jacksonville. They loaded trucks and sent them over. The FEMA took a long time. If then, he was still waiting for money. So what else would we need it for immediate direct hit in a storm? And then lastly, I would be interested in what Ocean Ridge and Lighthouse Point do in their reserves, only because we're very close, like Tequesta to Lighthouse Point in demographics, needs, history, and Ocean Ridge, because they're nearby. They're 1/4 of our size, but they're very strongly mimic our town. Other than that, that's just an amazing report, Natasha. Really amazing, and I'm very thrilled. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I think that's all.
A quick answer so I'm looking into the insurance as well and trying to get a second quote. And still waiting on the renewal for our current insurer. But as I look at the property coverage for the town, our deductibles are 5% of our insured value, which is about 26 million. So just based on that, it's our deductible is 1.3 million. So.
May
Thank
I
you. That's
make
good.
another point? Peggy was talking about Panama City, and I remember a lecture by the town manager up there. And one of the things he said was that he went into that job thinking they had great reserves, and within 2 weeks, they were gone. Because even though you may be getting money from these other places, it can be a year and a half before you see anything. And they're still waiting for some of their money. So, it's nice to say we have insurance, but you may need to pay for all of this right up front. And it's not just replacing our buildings. A lot of their cost, as I recall, was getting rid of the trash in the street, which cost them a fortune, just picking up trees that came down. So even though most of our property is private property and we wouldn't be responsible for fixing a home, there still are things that we would have to come up with that money and right away. So, we don't want to take too big a risk on not being able to fix something and have to wait for money to come in.
One more question, if I could throw it in for Marshall and Natasha, would be if we had a storm, would the state be responsible for A1A because it's a state road, or would we just be tasked with that funding and cost?
We'll take a look at that. Another interesting thing that came to mind that I think we should all discuss and look at, and I'll try to reach out to the folks up in the Panhandle, is what is that middle term exposure to tax dollar revenue loss? Because if all these homes get blown down and have to be rebuilt, they're not going to carry the same tax value on the books. So you have a $20 million house on the beach, it gets wiped out and it takes 5 years to rebuild, or they wait longer. What is that loss or to the revenue that we get off the tax? I don't know what that is. I don't have a good handle on that because I'm sure the property appraiser isn't going to continue to hold it while the structure's lost. Partial loss, you'll be fine, but like a full loss, if you start losing a lot of buildings, how does that kind of hit us?
Also,
I don't know that.
their
Good
building codes were at a whole different level than
Sure.
ours. And a lot of those homes are little small wooden, like I said, structures. And some of the newer ones, such as we have CBS roof with a whole lot of hurricane straps, they survived. A lot of them survived, but it would be good to know.
Mhm.
Okay. I think we have to also look at this a little differently. The percentage that is a universally applied percentage, I think is a little misleading. Large towns, large cities, small towns. Small town needs a higher percentage. We talked about it very briefly a few months ago. The cost of putting a roof on. Costs the same to put a roof on a small town as it does a large town. But as a percent of operating, it's a much larger percentage of our operating than it is a percentage of Boca's operating. So purely as a percentage of operating costs, small towns require to have a higher percent in reserves than large cities do. And it's not just a percent. You don't have to look at it in terms of, well, how many square miles do they manage, or how many people do they manage? A roof's a roof. I guess one could say, well, large cities have more roofs. Okay, so it's not just times X, but just in general, small needs a larger percentage, period. There's no question in my mind that we have these reserves to do projects. That's what reserves are for, whether you're dealing with a condominium or you're dealing with a town or a city. Fire rescue is a project, and we should be using some of these reserves for that project. I mean, I've been saying that right along. Is it 6 million or is it 1 million? I don't know yet. Okay, and I don't have an opinion yet. Do we use all the reserves for the project? No, not in my opinion. No, not all of them. A good chunk of them, though, yeah, for sure. But once we spend down a good chunk of it, we need a plan to replace some of that. And without a plan to replace some of it, we got ourselves a problem, because then you're sitting with no unassigned reserves. And we need assigned reserves to get us back to whatever percentage we think is a good number. So it's more than just how much do we put into the fire rescue program. If it brings whatever percentage we decide on, we can either bring it down to that percentage, or we can go a little bit below it even, as long as we have a plan to build back to it. So great job. I'm glad you got us thinking on this now. We need to send it over to the Financial Advisory Board, get their input on it. We need to think on it. I would ask if you would take a look at a few more small towns. And it's just for more information for us. It's really not for guidance, because every town has their own issues. But the other thing is, we need to have robust reserves once we have a fire department. Because we're going to need money to buy another ambulance. We're going to need money to buy another fire truck, or we would lease them. So if we decide to lease them, that's no difference than financing it. And we know what the finance costs are. You were very good at showing what that costs. So it'd be nice to just have the money, pay it outright. All depends on what interest rates are, what our returns are based on our modest investments. And we're really handcuffed on investments. We know that. But it's a comparison, and we'll run the numbers and see what the best way to go is on it. But we're going to need more money to drive this bus now, once we get fire, which is May 2024, which seems like a far distance, but it's going to be here before we know it. So we're going to have more employees, we're going to have more needs, more equipment, and we're going to get hit with big expenses when we have to start replacing these things. So great job.
Oh,
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
sure.
very much. Anybody have anything else to add before we move on? Marshall, anything you
Just
want to add?
procedurally, what is the desire of the commission to move this forward? What would you like me to do?
If you could just throw a couple more small towns onto it quickly, I would like, can we get this over to the Financial Advisory Board? I know they're meeting next week.
They're meeting in like 2 days. I don't know if we're.
Can we
I mean,
put
I
it-
don't know if it's.
Well,
possible. I mean, I
let's take our time then.
I mean, I don't know if it's worth just sharing the presentation with
Yes.
them just to get their juices going. I mean, we don't need them to do a full
No,
analysis
But
by the next
if you're
meeting, but,
available, if you could present it to them
Yeah, I
just-
think so.
and just get them thinking about it. Then
Right,
we're not looking for any
right.
recommendations from them yet, but, and then we'll send them the materials and let them start to just think about it independently, and we'll put it on their next agenda.
So you're available to give the presentation Thursday, 2:00?
Yep, yeah, I can do that Thursday at 2.
Okay.
Yeah,
We'll,
It'll just be a quick presentation, just exactly what I did here.
Yeah.
And really, it's
Sure.
it's going to require a lot of back and forth
Yes.
because, and now over the next few days, you're going to be like, oh, how about this? Or how, because that's what's happened to me over the last couple of weeks. So I think it's important to get it up as soon as possible.
And if you would share with them, it's just to get their juices going.
Right.
Not looking for a recommendation at this point.
I'll be sure, and I'm sure the vice mayor will be sure to bring her presentation to them.
And, you'll have more information and more data down the road.
Right.
This is just scratching the surface, just to get them
Exactly.
thinking.
Exactly.
Also,
Okay.
Mayor, if we could add to that list, Indian River Shores, to the north is an excellent source of comparable material because they did start a fire department and they're also very close to us in terms of being a barrier island in the demographics.
Oh, that'd be great.
Okay,
Yes,
yeah.
sir. So you could
There
maybe
you go.
see what they did. And Lighthouse Point also similar
Well,
established.
they're highly developed commercially.
Right,
It's
right. But they
really a-
started their own fire department.
Yeah, but it's a commercial
Oh,
town.
just, I know, I've been there, but I'm just offering that.
It doesn't compare at all.
Well, I think it does, but
I
it's
can
okay,
add
whatever she wants to
It's-
do. And
it's
then
easy.
Ocean
Yeah.
Ridge would be a
Yeah.
great one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ocean Ridge would make a lot of sense. I agree on Ocean Ridge. But that's very small.
Is also very
Okay.
similar population.
There you go.
They do keep the reserves above 50 because
Okay.
of threat of storm.
Very,
Same reason.
okay. Yeah,
They might be one of them.
Okay.
there you are.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, anything else before we move on? Okay, let's move on to commissioner comments. And John, you're first on the list, as usual.
So I'd like to have the residents know that many of the commissioners here attended a 4-day conference in Orlando with the Florida League of Cities with quite a comprehensive lineup of sessions on all kinds of subjects from ethics to equity to forms of government. And so being a fairly new guy to the world of government, it was quite interesting in many ways. And some I did have a problem with, to say the least, which I won't go into here. But it was a very good experience. It also shows another commitment on the part of the
commissioners that this is not, 2 days, two half days a month kind of deal. So far, this is almost 5 days a week. So that was a very good experience. I will add one thing on this whole thing with reserves and insurance. Can you imagine if we had a hurricane that blew over the water tower onto the library? I mean, that's the magnitude of the kind of thing that I worry about when I look up at it from the Highland Beach Club.
Bite your tongue, John.
But I mean, not only would it be the damage to the structure, but we'd be without water. I mean, so that's the magnitude, which I think these other towns don't have their own water supply and water plant that we have. So it's a very significant asset for this town that's quite unique. And I would ask that you keep that in your mind as you look at the numbers, given that's the one unique exception to all these towns that I think that are along the coast that I know of anyway. We also have an anonymous letter that came into the commission that actually I'm not sure how we would deal with it, or if it's our responsibility to deal with it, or if we should get some
That was
feedback.
really for information only, so the commission knew about it. It was sent to me with no name for return address.
Right.
Been turned over to the chief, and he's got it under.
Okay.
Yeah, so on that issue, I'd
got a
suggest the
plan on it.
commissioners reach out to Chief Hartman, or I'll have him reach out and give you updates. We know all about it. They're all over it. Every detail there, we have be fully versed.
Yeah.
I assume so. I just wanted to, since I received it, I want the residents to know that we're dealing with it and the chief is on it as he always is.
And he'll reach out to each of you and give you an update and answer any questions you might have.
My last comment really is, having spent some time in Vietnam in the war, I know what it's like when people are slaughtered, when the enemy comes in unannounced and they seek revenge. I just feel I've lost some sleep over the last few days. No question about it. My brain is just, it's amazing. And I'm glued to watching all of the events in Afghanistan. It's a deplorable situation. We're talking as many as 80,000 people at stake. And I say prayers, literally, for those who are stuck at that airport, including thousands of Americans. And I just want to express that prayers are needed at this time for an impossible situation that everybody could argue 9 ways of Sunday about the politics of it and so forth, but there's no question in my mind that this was a preventable disaster. So I reach out to everyone to keep our Afghan partners, friends, and certainly the Americans that are caught in this horrific catastrophe. Thank you.
Actually, I mirror a lot of what John just said. I felt that going to the Florida League of Cities Convention was a very worthwhile thing. And while there are a lot of these lectures that really don't apply to us because we're not like most jurisdictions, there is always some things that do apply to us. And I was very glad that I went. As far as Afghanistan, it turns my stomach. It's deplorable. I mean, I don't have enough horrifying words to say about it. And I also agree with John. I think it was preventable. And I've spoken enough today.
Peggy?
Thanks, Mayor. One other addition to the reserves, which I'm just being reminded, when the town sold the property from the water plant in Boca, we added several million. I don't have the number in front of me, but
I
that
think it
added to
was
it.
3.2 or 3.4 or
So
something like that.
that is responsible for a good third of that. League of Cities is always amazing. I think we're better leaders because of them. Some people say, well, I don't get League of Cities. If you could think of the state having a commission, it would be the commission for the whole state. and taking what we do and what we need in every town in the county to the legislator so that they know what we're needing and what we're asking. That's the best definition I can come up with. And lastly, I found such an interesting sign on the pool. I stayed at that hotel in the 80s with professional tennis. We had a tournament there. And it was then and is now like the second biggest pool in the country. And it was closed this trip. And why? Because the groundwater of Central Florida raised up and raised the pool with what 11 pounds a gallon is what a gallon of water weighs. It raised the pool and broke it. So they have a different problem than we do on the Central Florida has the issue of all the subterranean springs and rivers and caves and caverns filling with water coming down from Georgia, Alabama, the Appalachians, filling northern Florida, and in this case, raising the pool. So just another
There goes my
geologic
idea
problem.
for a town pool, huh?
Apparently not. And that's it. And thank you to my colleagues for their time and Marshall.
Okay.
I don't have anything else.
Okay, just a couple of quick things. One, can you update us, please, Marshall, on when we'll be getting the lights, the new lights on the crosswalk, the down lights? And Peggy, you were saying that a number of people were concerned on fire, on the new fire rescue department, that their taxes would be increased.
Yes, sir. That's what I heard on the street, at church, around town.
Okay,
so
well,
forth.
let me address that.
Publix. Thank you.
Number one, will not increase taxes. If anything, it would reduce taxes. But anybody out there, don't start saying, Doug said we're going to reduce taxes. Okay. But it's going to save us money. So purely the reduction in what fire rescue will cost the town could in fact result in a reduction in taxes. Now, yes, we're going to be financing some of it. How much, we don't know, because we're going to take some out of reserves, right? Okay. But whether it's financed through a bond offering or through bank loan or bank loans, that financing will be spread out over, let's say, 10 years, hypothetically, so that the cost of running the fire department and paying the debt down would be less than what we would have been paying if we stayed with Delray. So the net result is fire rescue will cost us less than what it would cost staying with Delray, including the financing of that debt. So it's not going to impact on increased taxes. Okay, got it?
Comment
That's
on
all
that, Mayor, just to reinforce the point. It would be, if there was any reason to justify a raise in the tax rate, it would probably not be because of fire, but for some other, right now, unforeseen event, action, whatever.
100% correct. Yes. Fire rescue would not be the culprit.
It also gives you a little flexibility.
Thank you. Thank you. Hear me now. If taxes go up, it's because of John. No, there's no thinking, no plans for that at all. Okay. Len, do you have anything to add? No? Okay. Over to you, Marshall.
Crosswalk lights, they're order. So Pat's tracking them down to see what the timeline is. Everything's in place. The vendor to install, we did an order direct. We're just waiting on delivery. So I don't know where they're walking them in from, but hopefully we'll get those soon. We put the order in, gosh, like 6 weeks ago. So I don't know how long it takes to get 16 lights, but I'll have Pat search it down and give us, but then as soon as we get them, we'll install them. That's pretty quick because all the wiring is there. So it still runs off of the solar. So that should be forthcoming. A couple other quick items. Officer Patricia Brook, thank you for helping a resident on A1A when their car broke down. We got a kudos for her. And then also for Detective Fernandez, interesting, helping an older gentleman that got lost looking for a funeral home in Boynton. I think it was for his wife. He couldn't find the funeral home. Fernandez helped the gentleman out, both being Marines, had the kindred spirit, and we took that gentleman to the funeral home so he would not be late. So Detective Fernandez, also thank you for all your hard work. And then to Chief Hartman, as I sent along earlier, crime is under control in Highland Beach, and kudos to you and your team for keeping everybody safe on a day-to-day basis. We did really well with keeping crime down, especially in light of hearing stories of how bad crime is getting. It's nice being in a town where you're absolutely safe.
Here, here.
Outside of that, I have nothing else, but a lot of work to do for you all, so I will get to it.
Okay. Chief, I see you're here. Is there anything you want to add? Madison, anything you want to add? Matt? Nothing? Can't bring anybody up. Okay, it is 3:50 and we will adjourn. Thank you all.